Good afternoon from Prague. I am Martina Pecková-Černá, and I am greeting you from the Arts and Theatre Institute. It is our pleasure to welcome you to the Green Thursday series of international online discussions with Czech and foreign guests from the field of performing arts. We are here every fourth Thursday at the same time, 3 p.m. Central European Time, with diverse moderators and guests ranging from dance and theater artists to curators, culture managers, and theorists.
The overall topic, "The show must go on, offline," was chosen so that we can address the common theme of sustainability and the performing arts from many perspectives. These include the response of the performing arts to the state of the environment and the COVID pandemic, as well as the field's emerging strategies to address urgent social changes and paradigm shifts in culture and in our societies. These discussions are organised by the International Cooperation Department and in collaboration with the European projects Create to Connect, Create to Impact, and the Central European Performing Arts Network, PACE V4. They also correspond with the Arts and Theatre Institutes, culture and the climate activities which serve as a communication platform for public and independent cultural organisations in the Czech Republic on global environmental challenges. We are available online on the Zoom platform right now, and later you can find our recordings on our YouTube channel. You, our spectators, will have the opportunity to ask our guests questions during the live meeting. Please feel free to use the Q&A section in your Zoom application.
Good afternoon. I believe we are online, so I would like to welcome you to the March edition of Show Must Go On Offline, the series of international discussions with performing arts professionals that is hosted by the Arts and Theatre Institute in Prague. So my name is Matúš Benža, and I am representing the Academy of Performing Arts in Bratislava, Slovakia. And it is my pleasure to be here, and I would like to thank the Arts and Theatre Institute for inviting me. And I'm really happy that I have 4 interesting guests to talk to. And we will discuss with our guests the individual and societal changes of life under COVID-19. So we will examine the community role of performing arts before and its transformation throughout the contactless reality of the pandemic. And furthermore, we will ask ourselves questions whether performing arts can help in repairing the cut ties, broken bonds, and other ailments within our communities. So today's topic is contactless communities, and I would like to introduce my guests today. So we have Miroslav Pavlíček from the Faculty of Social Sciences at the University of Ostrava from Czech Republic.
Hi, thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
We do not have Lukáš, as it was announced in the pre-recorded introduction, but we have Alicia Čičel, performer and choreographer and representative of the Common Space Initiative from Poland. Hello.
Hello.
I hope I pronounce your surname correctly.
Perfectly, thank you.
Thank you. We have Roman Černík, the artistic director of Johan Centrum and the Moving Station in Pilsen, Czech Republic.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. And we have Josh Edelman, senior lecturer from Manchester Metropolitan University and also the co-investigator of the Freelancers in the Dark initiative from the United Kingdom. So, hello, Josh.
Hello, thank you for having me.
It's pleasure. So I would like to start with Dr. Pavlicek and maybe set the scene for what is happening within the community. So in my Slovakian experience, we have seen a range of behaviors and emotions throughout the pandemic. So we've seen fear, compassion, and later it sort of descended into denial, some carelessness and fatigue. And I was wondering if this is sort of the universal reaction of facing a crisis, or are there some national variations in dealing with this kind of thing for over a period of 1 year now? So.
Well, thank you. I think it's a great question. I don't like talking about nations like generally.
Yeah.
I think that all the characteristics you have mentioned are still present at the same time, not in the society as a whole society, but in the mind of every individual as well. We all have mixed emotions and mix of these characteristics of fear or carelessness or everything, compassion and things like that. And I think that in the time are different. The strength, these components are differently strong in different times. It's always something like a negotiation. I think it's in my mind. I can say I'm afraid of the virus, and I don't want to make anybody ill. But I hate masks and I want to travel. I want to drink the beer in the garden of my favorite restaurant, and I want to play football, and I want to go to the theater,
Yes.
Yes. And it's the mix of the feelings, and then negotiations have different results, and it changes during the time according to the situation, how many dead people are, or how many people died, and or the political measures, if I think it's okay, it's not okay. People around me, maybe they hate the rules or they like the rules, and it makes me some reactions make as well. And the scientific findings are changing and so on. So I think the main result of this time, and you have said it's 1 year, the main result is that people are depressed, people are paralyzed. I think my students, many hundreds of students are depressed, and they are burned out or something like this. They are not creative. Nobody is creative this year, and this is what I think it's universal. It's global. But there are some difference between nations, probably not between Czechs and Slovaks. I don't think there. It's something else. But nations are differently, I think, disciplined, and nations are differently. They trust in politicians differently, yes, and they think different things about usefulness of the measures. And I think that's special maybe for the Czech Republic and for the post-communist countries, that we are more, I don't know, cautious, or we tend to interpret every rule as some danger for my freedom. Yeah. And the difference, my end, I have heard a nice sentence about the difference between Czechs and Slovaks, that we have the same number of people who do not follow the rules, but Czechs are more performative. They talk about it more, and they are doing it more visible. But the Slovaks are not so visible.
Yeah, I would like to mention one thing. When you talked about your students, I think it's very similar in our school, that especially with the theater students, that they cannot rehearse together, and it's very demanding on them. And also, I've never seen the first year students of our study program in person, because when we interviewed them before the entrance exams, we saw them only online, and then after first couple of days of a live school, we had to go online again, and so we never actually got to meet each other in person. So it's very strange working in this kind of situation. But let's go back to the society. So I think the pandemic highlighted many inequalities that are present in the society. So could you maybe tell us which communities were probably among the most affected?
I don't want to repeat what is full of TV of this, and every media talks about it the same. I think just sociologically that pandemic is some kind of risk that is very democratic. I can say that rich people or people, high educated people, doctors with PhD are afraid the same way as someone not educated, some poor people. It's the virus is democratic in this way. So if we could talk about inequalities, I think it's some kind of not status quo, but it's the same, that the classes that were risk are the same. I think that single parents or people at the risk of poverty are at the same risk of poverty. People who there is a chance of to lose their roof, be homeless is the same, maybe bigger risk, but actually the most affected people are people from people working in services, the middle class working in services, gastronomy or tourism, or actually culture. So what we
I think we're quite aware of the sort of the economic challenges of the pandemic. So many people can't work at the moment in their chosen field because the theaters are closed, in the service industry, the restaurants are closed, of course. But what other challenges are these communities facing? Because it's not only about money, it's also about well-being and etc. So maybe could you expand on this idea a little bit more?
Well, I think it's everybody needs to survive this. It's I don't think I don't know anything about the future. No one knows, because
No,
for example, actors, many actors, they are delivering food or they work in manual works. They do not play, they do not act, do not play theater. And I really don't know whether all of them will get back to the theaters. I hope so, but my friends are now selling bikes and motorbikes and stuff like that. I think there's more economic, it's more sure economic than the theater, and no one knows the speed of getting well of theaters, of the culture.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that is the big question for all of us, how things will get better in the future, because the audiences also might be different than the year before. Will they be, I'd say, will they be eager to throw away their masks and return to theaters or to concert venues, etc.? or will they be still very cautious? They will be weighing out the risks, etc. So what do you think? Are people really hungry for getting the so to speak, the full experience back, or will they be still very cautious? What are your expectations for the near future?
Mine or the raised hands, or
Yes.
or
Yes. Oh, now I see Alicia and Josh. So maybe would you like to add to what's been said? It would be great. So Alicia.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to go back to what Miroslav said before, and also maybe say that I really like discussions when we get into examples, whether it's from our lives or from the reports, because such a general statement as the risk is democratic, I'm not sure if I would agree with that. Of course, many of us are in danger, and our working conditions are changing drastically. But as a freelance artist in Poland, I would say that my social security and the social security of somebody who's working in a big corporation and has a full-time job and contract is totally different. So, and possibilities to work are completely different. So maybe also to, if it would be interesting for me if we can have an overall view how different fields and professions are dealing with the pandemic, whether it's social groups or also if we want to highlight this national perspective. I think the status of freelance artists in France, where I studied, is totally different during the pandemic than mine in Central Europe. So it's the one thing I would like to add. And the second one is that we're talking about individual perspective when we talk about emotions, but there are also bigger social structures that helps us to deal with those emotions, or to have a relief, or simply to take care of ourselves. And I would, as a feminist, I would like to also propose a perspective to maybe not to think about this individualistic self-care perspective, but to talk about communities of care and collectives of care. And I would be very curious to hear from you if you see those spaces, whether it's for you as an artist researcher, or whether it's for your students. Are there any spaces for those first year students where they can meet, exchange differently than only through Zoom? There are huge, I think there are huge challenges for us makers, organizers, to be resolved, and they're quite urgent. Yeah, thank you.
No, I fully agree what you said, because yeah, the virus is democratic in a way that it will infect everyone in the same way, but the ways of dealing with the aftermath of either being infected with COVID or dealing with the general situation in the society is different for everyone. And as you said, the freelance workers were one of the most vulnerable in Slovakia as well. And it's much difficult for someone who has the luxury of having a steady job with a monthly income, and where they can work from home or with a computer, every day. So it's definitely the experience is very, very different for those people. So, but Josh is also raising his hand, so I'm glad he would like to add something.
Well, just thank you both. I wanted to echo a lot of what Alicia just said. Actually, one of the things that seems quite different in the UK is that I don't think the virus has been particularly democratic in Britain. Actually, it's affected some communities much more than others. The two that jump out first are what non-white communities, which sometimes in the UK are called BAME. It's a kind of ridiculous acronym, but it's the one that we use. But we're talking about Black and minority ethnic communities generally in the UK, that's folks of African or African Caribbean descent or South Asian descent. Those are the biggest groups. And they've had COVID incidence rates that are up to 4 times what white Brits have experienced. And that has to do with a lot of things in terms of the jobs they tend to work in, both in kind of retail sector, but also in the National Health Service. Quite a lot of them are medical professionals, and obviously medical professionals have been hit by this. And the other thing, of course, is the elderly. The UK has the worst death rate overall. We're doing a little better right now, but overall for the pandemic in Europe. And a lot of that has to do with older people, and the way that was being handled, especially early on in the pandemic and the so-called first wave, was atrocious. And hopefully there's going to be some sort of inquiry into that. But the other thing that I think it's important to think about these communities of care that Alicia was talking about. We've definitely seen them here. The insecurity that freelance workers have in Britain, I can really only speak to Britain, is huge. And I think it's important to note that one of the big differences between the British theatre and theatres on the continent is that effectively all artistic professionals in Britain are freelancers, certainly in the theatre. Something like 80% of the people who work in theatre, not just the artists who work in theatre, but the people who work in theatres are freelancers. There is effectively no company in this country that has a fixed acting company. The RSC does, I think, per season. That's it. And even designers, technicians, box office staff, almost all of them are freelancers as well. So the economic hit that they've taken and the hit to their own sense of what it means to be an artist, what their career is, how they fit into the British artistic world, their sense of their calling, really, as somebody who wants to do this weird, wonderful thing that we do for a living, who wants to do that, has been just shattered. And I think one of the most difficult things, we can talk more about this with the study I'm working on later, has been that kind of lack of community. One of the effects of the pandemic, of course, is that we're isolated. We can't go and have a beer with a mate. Online communities has taken off, other kind of digital communities, but it's not quite the same. What I find fascinating, but also just painful, it kind of, my heart goes out. We're seeing all of these kind of peer-to-peer, low to the ground, just artists helping artists, freelancers helping freelancers, very local networks pop up. So in Manchester, where I teach, there's a number of groups that have emerged, some specifically for street artists, some specifically for dancers, some specifically for visual artists, some for everybody who wants to come. Their mailing lists, their Facebook groups, they meet in person kind of when they could for a bit in the summer. But they're very unofficial. They have no resources. They have no organization, but they're doing this crucial work of making people feel like you're still part of the artistic community. The work you're doing is still valuable, and still recognized. And that, especially when the theaters, the formal institutions that these freelancers have been working for decades in some cases, are now saying, we got nothing, we have no more work for you because we have no more money, because we've had to shut our doors. They don't blame the theaters necessarily. The freelancers are starting to make it themselves. And that kind of low to the ground solidarity, I think that's really interesting. I think it's been the thing that a lot of the people we've interviewed have been hanging on to. And that I actually think is a good sign for the future of the theater. It is a productive form of people helping one another. I'm looking for silver linings from this pandemic, and there aren't many of them, but this might be one we want to think about.
Yeah. So I think you did a very great segue to our next topic, and that's your project Freelancers in the Dark. And so from what I gathered, it's a research project that investigates the social, cultural, and economic consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic on independent art workers across UK. So England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. And yes. I was well, you said it already that there wasn't much much official response in terms of as emergency funding or support for these workers from the government. Was there any in the UK, or there wasn't really any?
Well, there was, and sorry, this is a slightly long answer, but it's a complicated and important question. The biggest thing that the UK government did to support workers, not just arts workers, but anybody with a job, was what they called the furlough scheme. So if your job had to be put on furlough, had to basically be canceled temporarily, the government would pay 80% of your salary. And that was huge. That it's extremely expensive, but it kept people alive. It kept people being able to pay their rent. And of course, the arts use that like every other business in this country. But that only worked if you were an employee, if you had a contract, if you were a freelancer, which, as I said, most people in the theater industry and almost all artists are, it didn't work. There was another thing for self-employed people, again, not specific to the arts. It was pretty hard. From what I can tell from our surveys, around half of the people we've surveyed said they were able to make some use of that. Most people said it was nowhere near enough to keep themselves going. It was a pittance. There was extra funding channeled specifically to the arts and culture through the Department for Arts, Department of Culture, and through the arts councils, the funders who fund these things. In most cases, though, that went to institutions. That went to institutional theaters, it went to museums, it went to art galleries, that kind of thing. It went to organizations. And those organizations, have to maintain their building, which has to be shut. So they are terrified. They're really terrified of shutting down. And what's happened is they haven't really passed a lot of that money on to freelancers who they tend to work with, but don't have an official relationship with. Now, there are some interesting things that I don't have time to go into now because I'll just bore you to tears about how England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland have responded to this differently. Because actually arts policy is what we call devolved. It's not Britain as a whole. The four nations do it differently. And very often a lot of people think Scotland in particular is a little more forward thinking on this. Our research seems to say that there is something to that Scots artists, Scots freelancers have been a little better served. But the reality is that most freelancers are struggling. And it is economic, of course it's economic, you got to pay your rent. But it's also this crisis of sense of self, People don't go into the arts for the money. I'm sorry. It's just a really foolish thing to do, especially in Britain. They go into it because they love it, and they go into it because it's who they are. And that sense, I am an artist, I have a relationship with the artistic community, has gotten broken up and destroyed. One of the things we're looking at is what is going to be the long-term effect of this pandemic on theater making in Britain. It's not just, this is a once in a generation event. I certainly hope it's a once in a generation event, once in a century, I hope. But we are going to be dealing with the after effects of this, for the rest of my life. And like I was saying about with these kind of freelancers meeting one another and working together and building kind of low to the ground relationships, that's a really positive development, I think, that could eventually lead to new ways of making work, new organizations, a more kind of light touch culture that I think could lead to a lot of innovation. On the other hand, I think a lot of people are just going to leave the industry. People really don't want to. And if you ask them, are you thinking about it? They say, I really don't want to, I really don't want to, I really don't want to. But ask them 4 times, sometimes they say, well, look, I might have to. And I think one of the important things to note is the way I said that the pandemic was not democratic before. It's not just about who dies. It's about who gets to continue their careers. And there's been a big problem in the UK, and I can't speak to elsewhere, of British theatre in particular not really looking like Britain, of people from minority ethnic backgrounds, people from working class backgrounds, and certainly immigrant backgrounds, not being as represented on stage, not being as represented backstage as educated middle class white Brits. This is going to make that harder. the people who are more vulnerable are more likely to drop out. That's just the reality of it. And they don't want to. They really don't want to. And that really pushes against this. The other massive upheaval we've had this summer is the Black Lives Matter movement, which I know started in the States, but it's been a very big thing in this country as well. I don't know if you saw the brilliant image of the statue of Edward Colston, who's a Bristol financier from the 19th century, the 18th century, and a slave trader, but who donated most of his money to build the city of Bristol. But he was like their leading citizen. He was also the leading slave trader of Bristol. They tore a statue down, threw it in the harbor. And that was, people have different views about it. You think you can tell what my view about that is. A lot of theaters have taken this sort of thing to heart and have thought, okay, we really can't keep doing what we're doing. We can't just keep telling a certain kind of stories. We have to really broaden out the sort of work we do. And they've looked around, they've realized all the people making decisions are middle-class white people. And so they've turned to freelancers, and they've turned to a more diverse group of freelancers. But if that diverse group of freelancers have to go away because they don't have the resources to kind of maintain themselves during this time, that progress that we've made is just going to go backwards. And I think I'm worried about that. And I know a lot of other people in this country are worried about that as well.
You mentioned many of the challenges that are faced by the independent workers in arts in the UK, but I'm quite curious about the underlying causes. Like, we see UK's performing arts industry as one of the most celebrated in the world, but why are the working conditions there so vulnerable?
Well, I could give you a very long answer. I could give you a very short answer. The very short answer is Margaret Thatcher. The longer answer involves the idea of is about the fact that we don't have the funded arts infrastructure in Britain that you do on the continent. We don't have city theaters, state theaters that have the regular ensemble, the staff of people, the buildings in every little town. I know not every little town. And I have a lot of colleagues across Europe, Scandinavia to Slovenia, to Hungary, to Estonia. And I know everybody complains about theaters not having the funding and the resources they need. And I'm not saying those complaints are wrong, but historically, Britain simply hasn't funded the arts to the level of the continent. And that divergence has just gotten bigger in the last 30 years. We've been very good at selling it, selling British arts and British theater in particular as world leading, but it hasn't always been backed up with solid financial structures, and also the kind of culture of we don't want to build too heavy institutions. We want to have directors and actors just hired for an individual show. They rehearse 4 or 5 weeks, and then you put it on. It runs for 2 months, and then you're all into the wind. That's common. I think that's a structure that we have in Britain, which most British artists just see as normal, which looks very weird from a European point of view. I think images from the outside can be deceptive. I do think that there's a lot of creative work going on here. There's a lot of really wonderful creative work going on. But basically all theater artists in this country live precariously. That's just the reality of it.
So we see that the UK society is very diverse, but you said that it is not reflected directly in the performing arts workforce. Is that true, or?
Yes, statistically, yeah. Like, the performing arts workforce is more white, more middle class, better educated than Britain as a whole. And this is not a new thing. This is something that's been the case for a long time. It's getting better. And the Manchester School of Theatre, where I teach, as well as other major drama schools around the country, are working very hard, thinking about how they recruit their students, who they put forward as the actors of the future, and our obligation to to think about who do we want on our stages and our television screens in the future. But it's a process that takes time. Yeah, it's there, and there, I should say, there are some really wonderful Black-led, Asian-led, queer-led, female-led theater companies around Britain that are doing wonderful work. They tend to be working at a smaller scale than, say, the National, the Royal Shakespeare, or the kind of big houses. That's changing. You know, from the time I've been in the UK 20 years now, and during that time, I've seen it get a lot better. But there's still work to do.
I'm curious about your initiatives, so Freelancers in the Dark. So who or what was the driving force behind the project? How did it all started?
Well, so it's run by my friend and colleague Holly Maples, who teaches the East 15 Acting School in East London. And we'd been talking about doing a project for some time about the way British artists, theater artists in particular, were responding to what the Arts Council was pushing, in this idea of, ooh, the new theater, it's got to be all digital, theater 3.0, interactive, and all that stuff. And we saw this kind of language behind the money and saying, well, what does it mean? You know, let's see how people are dealing with it. That was our idea. Then the pandemic hit. And we just looked around at all of our friends. I work as a director. I have worked as a director, as does Holly. And we said, this is just shocking. This is horrifying. We have to do something about it. We're both in the privileged position of being, you know, employed by universities. We applied for funding and we got it. And there have been a lot of groups that have been looking at the state of the British theater right now. Some really wonderful researchers out there. You can find links to it on our website, which is freelancersinthedark.com, that is very much focused on what's going on right now. What is the hit that people are taking? And that's really important to know. And even the government, you know, wants to know that so that they can try to ameliorate it a bit. Because academic projects, as opposed to kind of industry projects, sometimes run a little slowly, we thought we would take this step back and say, all right, what does it mean not just for the economic reality right now, but what does it mean for the way that artists see themselves, way arts workers see themselves as freelancers, and what does that mean for the future of the field? So the Freelancers in the Dark, there's always this image constantly of the ghost light. I don't know if this is just an Anglo-American thing, that when the theater is dark, when you leave for the evening, you leave that one light in the middle of the stage. And that image, okay, we are dark, but there still is a light here that is going to continue. That's that image that we keep coming back to. So we're doing a lot of interviews and focus groups to try to figure out what's going to happen next.
So I'm curious, what kind of information are you collecting from these freelancers? In brief?
We are asking them about kind of the economic hit they've taken, but we're really asking them about their sense of themselves as an artist and as a professional. Where do you see your work fitting into the larger field, and where do you see it in the future? And to what extent has the pandemic changed that? So a lot of it, you know, because other people have done so much good work on the economic stuff, we can look at the more subjective sense of how do artists feel about their place in the field. And part of it is there's a lot of grief, you know, there's a lot of loss here for projects that didn't happen, for work that didn't happen. And we want to kind of acknowledge and name and share that. But I think there's also this really interesting future. We also think that the ideas that freelancers have now become the new work in 10 years time or 5 years time. So we're trying to get a sense of people's sense of where they are now, how this has affected them, and because we think that's going to be important for where they go. So for instance, a lot of people are talking a lot more about digital work, not really a surprise, but people have really skilled themselves up in interactive gaming, in mixed reality sorts of things. I can't imagine that's not going to be part of the theater of the future, even when we can get back into the buildings themselves. And we are all desperate to get back into those buildings. That's just an example.
Yeah. And probably my last question would be like, what do you hope to achieve once the results of the survey are made public? Will there do you hope to achieve some change in the policy regarding, the freelancers, or what are your hopes and expectations?
Well, it's not just a survey, I should say. It's surveys,
Yeah, okay.
interviews, focus groups, all this. Yeah. So,
Study.
I know.
Yeah.
Study. Thank you. Absolutely, we hope to affect policy. I think it's fair to say that most arts funding in Britain sees itself as geared to institutions rather than artists. And that's not necessarily healthy. And that's not necessarily forward thinking. It's a bit conservative. So I think we want to affect that. We want to change the way that people think about how you should fund the arts. But I think we also want to help freelancers themselves better understand where they are and where they could be. I think there's a value of solidarity in hearing other people's stories. And the amount of people who have told me that they feel alone, that all their regular colleagues and friends, they just don't have the chance to talk to now, is huge. And we hope that by sharing the stories and sharing the patterns and seeing what sharing what we've found, we can help freelancers better orient themselves. You think of the metaphor of a mountaineer. You've lost your footing. You don't know where you are. Well, we're offering something, if not a map, at least a good pair of boots, so you can really know where you are and have the ability to start taking steps forward again.
Yeah. Maybe I would like to ask Alicia at this point, where there's some similar initiatives in Poland regarding freelance workers, or yeah.
There are many, but maybe they're differently structured, and also they're touching not necessarily only arts field. Maybe I would also like to add something to what Josh just said, that it's quite important for me, because we are having this discussion since the beginning of the pandemic here in arts in Poland and in Warsaw, in my artistic communities, concerning the privilege that some of us have, including myself, to create places for the visibility for those who can't afford it, whether because they have to change their job, whether because they have 2 kids and they can't work as an artist and they have to do something else. They don't have time, they don't have money. What we can do to bring those people, whether it's our peers or audiences. And I think there is a work of attention and vigilance to do. It's a training to think about communities that are excluded, about minorities groups that maybe are not part of our community, but need that support, whether it's economical or emotional. There are different kind of supports that we need. We have different needs. I also think about what the dynamic between freelance artists and institutions. They're closed, they are badly founded, but they continue to exist as phantoms or ghost institutions. But they're meant to be for us, I mean, artists and audiences, but they are maintaining this very ambivalent position, of course, because of the lack of the funding and different policies and politics and different European countries. It varies. But I think I'm very curious how institutions are observing what is happening on this grassroots level, because I would agree with Josh that there are many innovative approaches towards how art field could look like and how it could be redefined in more with more solidarity, with more empathy. I think it's quite urgent to also think not only about the pandemic, but a climate crisis, and not only about the perspective of 2021, but in the perspective of 10 next years. And I think there are many initiatives to observe. if it comes to your question, Matusz, there was a Facebook group, for example, that was called Invisible Hand, and there were many representatives of unions helping people, because the law was also changing. The information was not circulate and it was not accessible to everyone. So people were sharing information. There are still many groups on the internet where people share possibilities to continue to get funding, whether it's on the national level or European level. Then it will be also interesting to think about communities beyond Europe and who has access to those capital. But I observe small seminars, working groups. I think there are many interesting things happening on a small scale.
Yeah, I think what we've seen, and when I did also research about the UK, was that there have been a lot of like grassroots initiatives and a lot of private initiatives of people, organizations, where it was helping or fundraising. And I think it was the support coming from within the community was probably speedier and more targeted than the government response that we've seen, at least in Slovakia, I can say about that. So
I think that's the case.
Yeah.
It's been faster and more nimble, and I think that's part of the advantage of these grassroots initiatives, is that they can go faster and they can be more responsive, to the very issues that Alicia was talking about. That if there is a community that seems, in Manchester, for instance, there's a large Polish community, and one of the questions there is there theater in Polish in Manchester? So rather than kind of go through everything, you can just get a bunch of Polish actors together and do it, and you bring in this organization or that organization or this university that wants to help out, and then you just get it done. And then you present to the Arts Council as a fait accompli, they fund it. But the problem with these things is they're often small. Sometimes I think that we also have to recognize some of these problems are very big. And certainly when Alicia is talking about the climate crisis, absolutely there's a need for local organization, but there's also a need for the kind of large-scale resources that, frankly, only the state can provide.
Yeah, no, the sustainability is a big topic, and I think in Slovakia we don't even think about it in terms of arts or performing arts or theater. I think Czech Republic is even more advanced than us in this area. We think about environment in terms of how we shop, how we behave, but so far the arts have been under the radar in terms of talking about ecology in Slovakia at the moment. So, but I hope this will change as well, because it's quite important to change all aspects of our lives. Yeah, Alicia.
Yes, here I would like to mention there. I think about one very impressive initiative that I think started last year, that is called Museums for Climate. And it's a non-formal group of different art workers from different institutions or freelance organizers, producers, artists. And they also now creating a bigger group that is called Culture for Climate. And they do free webinars, and they inform each other, share different publications, and also they share good practices, what we can do now in our institutions or in our artistic practices to think more sustainably and to introduce ecological solutions that sometimes are very easy to implement if we just share the information and talk about the team and imagine the future differently. So I would like to name this initiative because it's very impressive. And I also, as an artist, for example, lately I was listening to their meeting concerning how which ecological materials you can use in artistic production and in culture production to be more ecological as an organizer or artist. And I think there are many resources which are accessible. But I also agree with Josh that it's not only our duty and our very often unpaid work and commitment, but also it has to be, we need a change in policy on national and European and far bigger level.
I would like to move to your initiative, the Common Space. So from what I gather, it's a really true grassroots initiative that brings together artists from areas of dance and choreography, but also from visual arts. But it also includes critics, researchers, even organizers, also students. And so you've been organizing these bi-weekly Zoom meetings, is that correct? And I'm quite interesting about this. In the emails when we were exchanging some notes, you said something about the role of dance within Polish culture, and I think in Slovakia we have very similar experience that dance has been always treated as an appendix to theater or opera in terms of ballet, but it still hasn't been given the attention and the resources it deserves and needs. So I was quite interesting to hear about this in terms of Poland. How does it work there?
Yes, certainly. We have something in common. Dance and choreography are also not as represented, not as funded and supported as different art fields. And I think here about the theater, and I think the very big achievement of the second Congress of Dance that happened last year was that what happened is that we have different separate founding in the Ministry of Culture and National Heritage, and it's very big achievement. And maybe it's hard to imagine how, but the field of theater is twice big than the dance. So I checked the numbers, and let's say there are 5,000 workers in the theater field and 2,500 in dance. We are a smaller field. But dance makers are, I also checked a survey from 2020, are getting paid much lower than the national average. I also read a terrifying report what was happening during the pandemic. Many people lost their job, lost their income, and were left with nothing. There is no social security and social help. There were programs established by the government last year, and they continue to work this year, but it's not enough. And I think what is happening is really disastrous. The consequences will be big. What I should mention maybe is also that we have, I have some notes, that we have an Institute of Music and Dance that was created in 2010 after also discussions from in the field. There was an important congress in 2009 that this has led to creation of this institute. This is why we have this dance congresses not each year, because the first one was in 2011 and second one in 2020. And there's much work that need to be done in terms of visibility, emancipation, to say it simply, emancipation of the discipline. Because the economic disproportions are huge. If you are working as a choreographer in dramatic theater in national or regional institutions, you don't get paid as much as theater director, even though if you do as much work, even though if you are as present during the rehearsals as the other collaborators. So I think we still need to have a very important discussion about this disproportions, but also about social security for freelancers and for the people who are working in art institutions. as well.
I was also curious about, were certain parts of the cultural and creative industries in Poland affected more than the others? Was this the case in Poland?
I think it's hard to say. I was preparing for this webinar and I read some reports and also observing my friends, artists in different fields. I think we were hit equally, but we can't continue to work. When I say we, I mean choreographers, dancers, as often as, for example, theater makers, because we don't have institutions. There are many theater institutions in different regions in Poland. I don't know how many exactly, but let's say 100. And there is no one center for choreography or dance in Poland. That's really, really, really sad, because it's quite important. If even though if these institutions are closed, there are still rehearsals happening. There's still preparations for the exhibitions. Maybe not for now, but for at least for 2021, 2022. People are, doing a bricolage of different professions and different projects and different institutions, if they have those institutions. And because we don't have them, we were left alone. The only institution that we have is the biggest institution that is operating on a 1-year scale, let's say. So we can apply for scholarships or for social allowances that were put in place last year, but it's very punctual and it's it's not making possible to think about the field on a sustainable long time scale.
So I would also like to ask Roman Chernik about his experiences with the pandemic at the moment. How is things happening in Pilsen?
Yeah, I try to hear many really interesting notice. The first, I had to say that for me also the virus, there is some equality with a touch of virus. I was born in part of Czech Republic, which is most touched by death of virus, and we knew that the system of public healthcare was destroyed before, and the pandemic situation they show this complication with the healthcare system in like a provincial part of countryside and some small town near the border, and we could compare this, and also the situation with independent culture center like we are, and city culture organization is more different. We try to build our center multidisciplinary, that we could use many support and we had a half part of our budget from our own service, but it was education, it was culture event, and nothing continue now. We lost everything. We had courses for public, for children, for bands, seniors, and also we organized some program for schools. Nothing continue. It's 1 year, and especially I think that's really special practice of government in our country, that culture and education was like a victim of this pandemic situation. We had football matches, we have ice hockey matches, but culture is closed. And I felt also that there are two, like an epoch of this year. In the first, in spring, we were we had a power to support the society. For example, we organized some culture events for social houses for seniors and disabled people. We play under the balcony. We got some prize of culture activity, something like that. there were summer, we organized some activities in the countryside, we organized some summer festival. We tried to explain our program, which we prepared before. And then autumn, and everything was more wrong, and we start to alone. And also, for example, in our center, we try to support artists and light designers and producers. We collect money for half-part-time job. It was more horrible for them because there were no freelancers and no full they have no full job, and the support was nothing for them. Yeah, you know, they go away from both sides. But I think it's necessary to say something in a good side. We have associations which really which made really good work. It was Association for Independent Theaters. They were in a meeting with Minister of Culture. They really pushed them, and they open support also for our field. The same in the dance field, Vizetance. The representative of our big association, they were part of this meeting and discussion, like a people from industry. Yeah. And I said we have a close to culture education. We have a 1 year children without school. You know, it's horrible. And also all the time the factory is going without some regularly they working and it's not possible to compare. We felt that the government you know the they put us out from the board, yeah, to the sea. But yeah, I really like to hear what Alicia said, that we start to organize together, especially in the city. We really quickly start to make a net. And funny, it's maybe it's not so nice to speak about it, but we really quickly organize some activities. I spoke about balcony festival, and also we organize some like a TV set production from independent culture. We make a collective from another independent place together. Normally we are a little bit in concurrency, but now we work really another like a collaborate in a good collaboration way, and other things, and then start official institution. Uh, I think that's our freedom, of course, but you know, and we stay all time to be independent, to collect our project how we want, but now we stay alone. And of course, I have to say that the city of Plzeň, they support us. It's necessary to say. Maybe it's some changing after last 10 years. Maybe it's some result of culture capital in 2015 that especially Major and team around him, they hear us, they know about us, and for example, we have a long-term support, 4 years support grants, and especially for our center, it was money which we could use all the time. It was only one, how to say, order money which we could work with it. Sorry, maybe I was so long.
No, I'm quite curious about one thing, because your art center doesn't only do productions, but you also do quite a lot of social work and education. So I was curious whether these elements were there from the very beginning, or did they come in at a later stage? Did you add them later on, or?
No. The association which leading now our culture space was born like association for artists, educators, and social workers. We start together from the first point, and all the time we try to to compare, to collaborate. We organize some like a community project in countryside. For example, this summer we found some new place. There was some ruin of Baroque church, and we organized big festival. It's a really countryside. It's a really small village around, and we make there some festival of like a theater and dance in nature. The center was this ruin and was really successful, and we want to continue with this. And was new, like a new way how to little bit support small village communities,
Yeah.
which are now really outside of big, big political team, big support. And it was for us like a really good experience to make this.
Mm. Can I ask you about the main target groups of your social outreach and educational projects? Are these people from Pilsen or from around, and who kind of audiences do you work with?
Yeah. We are focused for Plzeň because we felt ourselves like a culture service for Plzeň in special field. We have a stage for alternative theater and contemporary dance. We also organize the residency. It's interesting because the residency program could continuing. Yesterday we've started new residency cycles with colleagues from Ostrava, and also we have a we call the studio of drama in education. We're working with children from 3 or 4 years old till seniors. We have also collaborate with seniors group, and also we organize some support, for example, for group which students group from university and secondary schools, how to make some their own culture project. Yeah, the main target group for us are young people, especially students from university or people who are interested in art. And when we got a new building, or it's new, not new building, because it's just, we settled old railway station, and in 2015 it was rebuilt, and from the time we also have a visual art program. And today we start to prepare exhibition in a window of the railway station building, because there are platform, and people who waiting for train, they will see the exhibition. It's interesting for Alisa. It's exhibition from we collaborate with Association Ciocia, which is organization which supported Polish polskim kobietam, Polish girls, to find medical care in Czech Republic. And some artists organize some collection of graphics, and we will present these graphics, which organize this fund for support of Polish girls and women. Yeah, that's about target group. And also we are only our specialties contemporary dance, and we call alternative or open theater crossover projects, something like that. That's our place in the city.
So the impact of the pandemic on your organization, and so have you been able to sustain some of the activities in the original form, or have you been creating new activities for these contactless times that we live in? Or so were you able to adapt, or did you create some new formats and some new events for your audiences?
We are closed a long time, and we had to find another activity to support artists and our practitioners. We felt that it's necessary to be like a safe port for them. Most our friends, they are working in some other projects which are go away, for example the big festivals and something like this, and some small budget from us, it's for them most support what they use. And of course, we open some, we have a podcast channel. We prepare like a video version of our performances, which we produced. We we organize, I said, some like a TV channel with other colleagues, and also we prepare the countryside festival. Uh, that's a new format, and also we organize festival, for example, for children theater or for youth theater, and now we prepare because they can't to present or they couldn't present it whole year, and we prepare some like a we call flying friends, which can go to the village, to the small town, and support them with dramaturgy, regie, to make some small workshop. Uh, uh, when it will be a little bit possible, we take our van and we will go to the small town and village to support people, children and young people with their artistic, work. That's new
Okay.
form of our work.
Well, speaking of new initiatives, I would like to transfer back to Alicia and talk about Common Space. And so what sparked the initiative? Was Common Space in the making before the pandemic, or was the pandemic the main catalyst of the creation of the initiative? Because you started in May 2020, right?
Yes, exactly. I find it difficult to say that it was a catalyst, but it's true. It enabled us to meet across Poland and actually across Europe, because many members of the initiative are living in different cities of Poland and abroad. And this wouldn't be possible if it happened in Krakow and Warsaw and in any other city, because the dance communities are so small. They're nomad, but they're very small. Meeting on a platform, an online platform, enabled us to have a quite big gathering. So from the beginning, to give you an image of what we're doing and how it looks like, we're a group of 10, 15, 30. The biggest group was 40 something people. So if you think about it, big cultural institutions, it's nothing. But when you think about people working collectively, soon it will be for 1 year, maintaining a dialogue and artistic research and meeting and exchanging and making knowledge accessible. For me, it's quite huge. So there is something interesting for me. Also, being a choreographer who studied abroad, from my personal perspective, it's interesting. I was moving between countries. I'm still now not so much, but I was moving as an artist and researcher, and then this happened in May 2020, and I could first reconnect because I came back after studies in 2019, so I can reconnect with the Polish community of people who are making art here, but also our Poles living abroad, and also to kind of there was a lack to be filled. This is also quite important because I said before that we don't have any dance center or choreographic center in Poland. It's true, but we had very important institution that was organized around Art Station Foundation that changed their location from Poznan in Poland to Switzerland. And now they're coming back already, proposing an online program, and they will come back to Poland hopefully at the end of this year. But during the pandemic, we didn't have this important place where we had workshops. It was also a place for production. It was a place for emerging artists, because there was a solo project for young artists to make their first piece. It was amazing, is amazing place, but we strongly, I think, during the pandemic felt the lack of it. Also because it was a place where people were gathering, and it's quite important for nomadic and quite active field of freelance artists to meet from time to time and to cooperate together. So yeah, I think it was an advantage that we took out of pandemic. And I think for me, it has started from the need of having a artistic community, also having a platform or a place where we can develop artistic research in the country where there are no institutions where we can do it. If we're not doing a PhD at the universities, there are five academies where you can study dance or choreography, and it includes one university. But they're mainly also part of the Polish studies. There are no different departments for dance and choreography. So also we're kind of the weirdos at the academia. And most of the time we don't want to do academic research. We want to do artistic research. Where we can do this, let's meet. Let's read texts. Let's talk about what we're doing. Let's share our practices. Let's invent new language also, how we want to talk about what we're doing. So this is the work that we're doing. We're meeting twice a month regularly. I think it's a huge achievement. Since the beginning, we're also sharing the organizational work that's behind. It's quite simple. You just need to put a link online. You need to make people meet again and talk about what kind of topics are interesting and to talk about right now, because we don't have a programmation for 1 year. We're inventing. And also it's very interesting when I think about these grassroots initiatives that we can be quite responsive and we can create a program that it's crafted to our needs. And this I think it's very fruitful. And it could be a proposition for art institutions. Of course, they're because they're funded and they are part of the bigger structures. It might be hard to do this, but for me, this initiative is role model. Also, what it's quite important is that we're non-hierarchical, non-formal group, which means that every decision that we make is based on consensus, and we vote, we do polls. Yes, it takes time. It's difficult. Sometimes it's annoying, but it's possible. And for at least for a group of 15 people. But I believe that for bigger groups as well, it just required patience. And we don't have funding for that. Yeah.
Will you be looking for funding in the future to make this structure more sustainable, or maybe even trying to, for lack of a better word, like institutionalize it in a way that you could really do, give your artistic research more, a framework of sorts? Are there any plans for the future like this? Or not yet? Or
it's a big discussion among us also, because there are some advantages in being a non-formal group and non-formalizing it and not being part of this different structures. But there are also disadvantages. Let's say applying for the grants from Ministry of Culture. We are not association, so we can't do this. But we have we're planning to, because we're sharing and producing art exchange and research, we also want to share what we're doing. The first thing that what we did is, and I encourage you to go on our Facebook page, is that we created a calendar for this year. And the images that are part of this calendar, it's free, it's online, you can download it, are the visual notes that were created throughout the year by Dana Chmielewska, who is a choreographer and graphic designer, and with the help of another choreographer, and they created a very beautiful art object. And you can see visual notes that include our collective knowledge. So that was the first attempt, and now we have another one that is bigger. that we want to make a book based on our experiences, also to share the knowledge that we have, and extremely beautiful materials that are still being produced. So we applied for one grant. We also wrote an application collectively, which for me was also a very interesting artistic practice, to do this with other people and to really debate on few words. Yeah, I treated, I think for me it's an experiment. We say, let's see what happens. There are few people who are big fans of do it yourself, do it with other policies and philosophies of life. So maybe we can handle it. It's also a question, how much energy we want to put in that initiative, because it's a non-formal, it's a collective, and so yeah, we are still shaping along the way how we wanna work together, and see also what are the possibilities, yeah, and resources that we can use and share. And I want to say, it's still open. So as long as you feel that you share, somebody feels he, she, they share the values that we share, you are invited to be part of it. This is also quite important for us to be open and to be inclusive, and you really want to work on that. Also to invite artists with different disabilities that maybe they don't have the same access as we do, whether I think about sign language or different kind of tools that to make this initiative grow.
It's very interesting, and I think it's quite the work you've been doing is it sounds tremendous and great. So and I hope it will continue in the future as well. So
what I would like to add is also what is quite impressive. I'm since the beginning in the common space, and I already see the benefits from creating this initiative, that it's not working only for us, but also outside in our personal projects or in the way that we think about the field. It's also what I haven't said is that we try to create a safe space. We try to create also to share a language that is accessible. I studied at the academia, and I could easily talk about very difficult philosophical, theoretical texts, but maybe for some other person, this language is not accessible. How we can, where is the meeting point? How we can talk about what is interesting for us. Also, how we can talk from the practices, because sometimes people are not interested in theory, but they're making it in their practice, whether it's organization or as an artist. I'm a huge fan of artists writing and artists book, and I think there's still many discoveries to make. So we're talking about different knowledges, and also situated knowledges. They are situated in our bodies, experiences, who we are, what are our values. But so this is the initiative, but it's like you give and you take and you bring it further. So what is very interesting for me, it's also to hear how this name common space is circulating in different fields, and how people say to us, wow, it's possible to meet, to acknowledge the difference, to see that there is a strength in being together, and to grow and to disagree. Yeah, so it's like a micro utopia, and hopefully we will learn how to make it sustainable.
I see Josh raising his hand. So
I just wanted to say, just thank you, Alicia. But I see this this is something that I often try to investigate in my own work, my research work, is the way that the structure of how you make the art, the institutional structure of the art, is not a totally separate thing from the art that you make. You know, that the one influences the other. If you want to make a democratic, open-minded, inclusive art, you need a democratic, open-minded institution to do it. You know, if you want to make a non-hierarchical art, you need a non-hierarchical institution to do it. I'm also thinking of what Roman was talking about in terms of the relationship that he had with the community in Pilsen, and the way that you can just do things because you know people. You know, the project under the awnings, I'm sorry, I forget the exact term. Because you have those relationships, because that's built in, then you can do that. And I, you know, in my own research and in my own kind of working with artists around Britain and in Ireland, where I lived for many years, I'm trying to push people to think about, you know, these organizational, structural things. They're not sexy, right? People want to talk about the work itself. We're artists. We want to talk about art. I get it. But I think these non-sexy things are actually the foundation of how you innovate, how you make new art, and that's the point, right? So I really love what you're talking about, Alicia, and I wish you all the best, obviously, but I also want to encourage more people to think that way about not just the artwork, but the whole art practice. You know, we can't separate out the artwork that we make at the end of the day from the way that we make it. And if COVID has shown us nothing else, it's certainly shown us that.
I agree. So we in the pandemic, we have seen a lot of new ways of presenting art, and many centers are creating new programs. And I'm curious, especially about the online activities. Do you think they will continue after the situation will get better, or do you think that they will sort of die out in a way? That people will be so eager to experience the art in person than through online experience. From what I've read, that in some countries the being able to see theater or performance online made it more accessible to certain demographics. So how do you see, and I think this is a question for all of you, how do you see this relationship between live, online, and the future in the art? So maybe Roman can start, Alicia, and then Josh. How do you feel about this issue?
We found some new way how to present our work. Of course, there are new address which could be touch of our new channel, for example, new podcast, and also we developed some new form for documentary of our work, because we made a lot of projects really in action on streets and something, but we had no really good documentary archive for documentary, and we learned so much. And also how to present, for example, our performances, because now we collect the really good group of people who knows to make a video art, who really quickly coordinate the activity, how to record it and something like this. And also the network between associations and people which we develop through this pandemic situation. I hope will be continuing we will be in continuing time. And also we share some experiences together, informally, but share a really good experiments, and also professionals in some special professions. That's could be good, I think. But you know, I'm theater maker, and for me, it's I had some like a metaphor. It's like an instant soup. It's soup. There is a noodle. There is a vegetable. Yeah, it's instant. And for me, same. Theater in but also there are new forms. For example, in National Theatre, I saw the really good performance which use this, the windows and speaking heads, and really use like a language of the performance. Maybe it could be new something, but I was born, I'm educated, I really like to play live, and I think it's same in dance. It's interesting to make some like a dance film, but the dancer on the empty space on the floor, it's another feeling than behind this glass something. That's my opinion and our experiences. Thank you.
Yeah. Alicia, how about you? How do you feel about the online trend?
We also skipped, I don't know, Miroslav, if you have anything to add.
Oh yes.
And then me.
Okay, I'm sorry, Miroslav. How do you feel about this online versus offline, or online versus live?
I will then say something about the democracy of virus, but maybe at the end. But first, I'm sure that people hate online. People are hungry for anything that is offline, and maybe for a month or two, 1 year. But I think that maybe later would be some combination, because someone can be at home and someone in the theater, and everybody can be satisfied. I think it's great for teaching as well. Someone can go to school, and some distant students, maybe they are at work or somewhere, and watching the lessons, and it could be great combination. That's all I think.
Thank you.
I would like to add one layer of that to that of the production of the online culture, because I think we're innovative and really a creative species, but to make dance work, it requires choreographer, dancer, but also maybe somebody who will make the video, somebody who will edit it, some institution that would put it on the web. So it's a much bigger structure. I think what I was observing also in terms of scholarship and grants, that many institutions thought that it would be so easy for artists to go online. Of course, I can put a camera in my studio and record things. And luckily, I know how to edit, but many people first won't have a camera, won't have access to the camera, won't know how to do this, won't have a budget to somebody to pay for it, and then to pay another person to edit it. There's some also, there's a backstage to that online culture. It's not only, it's easy to do it, but to make it interesting, to also make it something that we want to experience. I've heard only about one performance of a very prominent performance artist, Wojtek Ziemielski, who made a theater piece using video conference platform. One production throughout the 1 year, and everyone from all my friends, I've heard that they get over it. They can't watch it. It's tiring. Also, being a dance maker who had a premiere streamed online. And also being a film student, I know that what I do on stage and what somebody's doing and translating it through the camera, it's something different. It's totally different experience. It's actually this person's authorship and view on what I'm doing. It's not my piece, but people who are sitting, who are audiences of these online performances, are actually watching some kind of negotiation between two of us. So I think that we also need to reflect upon this. I think there are many interesting things. There's this one aspect that it's the accessibility. It's true. There were concerts that were hosting 1,000 people, and normally probably this musician could only present his or her work for 100 people in the Philharmonic. But because of the online tool, it's possible to make it to open it for bigger audiences. Then the question is, if we think about the numbers, if we want, with our aim is to think about how big our audiences are. What about makers who are doing art, one-to-one performances? There is also participatory theater for people who are making very small-scale projects. What about them? What about site-specific art, when you collaborate with nature and non-human collaborators and natural contexts? How translate those experiences that are also multisensory experiences? I'm not a huge fan of technology, but I think there are still experiments and interesting topics to dig in digital world, but as well as an offline world. And I think it will be nice to keep those two paths going, as long as we can imagine that we work body to body. For me, it's quite important. I'm a dancer. I can't imagine working with avatars.
Yeah.
It's impossible. And to give the opportunity for artists who are interested in developing the video work, digital work, interactive online production, it's great, but let's share the resources and value as much as small scale projects and big online premieres.
Yeah. And I think this was possibly the biggest case with the UK, that the online streaming actually brought theatre to communities that were sort of not able to get live performances. So it really, I would say, in a way, democratized the art for those people. Is it true, or how?
Well, it democratized the distribution. So the National Theatre, we call it the NT, has a program called NT Live.
Yeah.
Confusing name because it's not live often. It's recorded.
Yeah.
But it's streamed versions of National Theatre productions, usually very high spec, multi-camera work, edited, really quite beautiful, very easy to follow, and not cheap to make. And they've expanded out, so you'll have major London theatres like the Dunbar Warehouse or the Old Vic, the Young Vic, sometimes putting their shows in that. And that traditionally has gone to cinemas. It's been happening for over a decade now. And yes, there is a lot of democratization there, where, if you're in a small town that doesn't have a theater, and that's a lot of small towns in this country, you can see a very professional show with some of the best actors in London on your screens. And now they've streamed it, and you can watch this online. And, at the beginning of the pandemic, I really enjoyed the number of theater companies. The Worcester Group was putting their old archive online. Everybody was putting everything online. I could see anything I wanted from, Moscow to Sao Paulo, just a different website. And that's really cool. And there's also been a lot of, certainly I can speak to Britain, there's been a lot of interesting work that's been made for the web over the last year. I know Forced Entertainment did a piece, which I think was called End Meeting for All. It was done over Zoom. It was about Zoom. The National Theatre of Scotland has done some really interesting work. I recently saw something called Dream, which was an online interactive Midsummer Night's Dream derived thing that was fascinating, and was all about motion capture, that kind of thing. The reality is, I guess, two things. Sorry for the long answer. First, there have been companies that have been experimenting with online formats, not just distributing shows online, but actually making shows that incorporate digital technology for a long time, far longer than this pandemic. One of my favorites is Blast Theory. I don't know if Blast Theory is known outside of the UK particularly well, but they use a lot of mobile phone technology. So actually part of what's interesting there is that it's this combination of the live and the technological and how the two interact with each other. You know, the guided walk through Venice, for instance, with someone on the phone telling you what to do is really fascinating. It wouldn't work just digital, it wouldn't work just live. It's all about the combination. So we have some experience. And when companies are trying to do things now, they are drawing on that experience. And there's some great stuff. But I don't think we have, I think as an art form, we don't yet know what online theater looks like. We don't have a kind of set of norms and expectations for it the way we do for theater, live theater. And very often, the danger is that it looks like television. And we can watch so much television and so much movies, so many films now that are just, you know, streamed to our homes, and they look so good. Just technically, it looks professionally made. My impulse is that theater shouldn't try to be television. It should try to be something else, even if it's incorporating digital technology, which inevitably is going to happen, you know, because it's part of our lives. I don't know if I know yet what that new form is going to look like. I don't think I've seen anything yet personally where I say that's it, that's the model for the future. But that's part of why, you know, as I was saying before, that's why this is so exciting. All these little experiments that are happening now of how you can do something that is genuinely theater, that is genuinely a stage event, but happens through with the medium of digital technology. There are a lot of really clever artists trying to figure that out. And that's how progress happens. You know, a lot of really clever artists try stuff. Some of it works, some of it doesn't. You refine it, refine it, and eventually you find something really, you know, game-changing. But it's exciting to me because I think we're still in that figuring it out stage. Yeah.
Yeah. So we have lost about 15 minutes, and to wrap up our conversation, which has been very pleasant and very informative, I would like to ask you, speaking from my personal experience, working at a performing arts university, we have 3 faculties. We have theater, film, and music and dance, and we've always worked very separately. So one good thing about the pandemic was that it sort of brought us together, because we had to deal with the same issues, and we realized it's easier to work together than to work in silos next to each other and not talk to each other. So how do you feel? What is the one or couple of those good things that happen because of the pandemic that maybe wouldn't happen otherwise, and that you would hope to keep in your practice, in your work with the communities, or what you basically help to retain for the future that will be hopefully virus-free? So maybe we can start with Miroslav, then with Roman, Alicia, and Josh at the end.
Okay, thank you. So I can start with the democracy of the virus. Sorry, I know the question, but it's a term of Ulrich Beck, sociologist from 80s. Maybe you know that. It's a Risk Society book, and he said that risks are generally democratic because, for example, if you breathe the dirty air, then it doesn't matter if you're rich or you're poor. That's the democracy of this. And this is the same, just in the meaning that the stratification is not classical. It's not democratic. It's not. It's hard to say that someone is the worst affected. Maybe freelance artist, maybe gastronomy, maybe traveling, and not the. It's the middle class and services, culture. It's the worst. Yeah, I understand. But my students are social workers. We work with people, homeless people. There's nothing new. I think it's more dangerous, more a risk, but it's the risk the same. But what is new? There are new risks for the middle class and for the service. I know many rich people who are now absolutely poor. They have nothing. Maybe they were selling some dresses or teaching diving or something like anything. So many communities are now down that it's hard to say anything generally about it. That it's some new situation that's democratic in an ironic way. I think we have the Czech irony in the base of our nation. I can say that our president said, it's not irony, our president said that the best actors are hungry actors, because only hungry actor can make a good art. These are the words of our president. Then we have invisible minister of culture, and if you watch media, there are actors who are digging graves, for example, and everybody says, "Hey, look, this is great artist. He can make money like this. He can work with hands and so on." This is the atmosphere that is like a tragedy or like a comedy. We don't know, but it's atmosphere where I can find only some ironic things like democracy of the virus. The question was, what is good? I think that's the only, probably not many good things we can find in this situation. I'm an actor as well, so I can take it in the theater or cinema. I think there is one general topic that is really global now. The culture can be now global because the whole world knows what's pandemia, knows the coronavirus, and the feelings are maybe similar. So maybe it's a step for the culture that is understood all around the world. It's some. I tried to find anything positive. Yeah.
What about you, Roman? How do you feel about? I hope there are some good things that we can keep for the future, even though the last year has been very hard.
I have to say that we used the time also for some concentration for ourselves. We develop a new strategic plan. We try to describe some our fields which we could more. We could grow, or maybe some fields which we put away, or a little bit we will close some part of our activities. And also we clean some like communication inside of the team. It is time to be concentrate for ourselves. And also the main goal what we found it to develop also the contact with community, to open the space for personal meeting, for some, it's not necessary to make a big show. It's good to open the space for some small discussion, about some small theme, or to continue with contact with social association, healthcare association, ecological association, to create new form of public dialogue. I think that will be our new role, or maybe a role which will be like note more than we made before, but we make in the future maybe deeply. And also the question which we also discussed is if the people around us will really need our art, you know, and that will be interesting. And also we know that we will also work more deeply with educational project to open some new courses for adults, and maybe uh, prepare some like a space for something like a quarter council to meet people from another jobs. Now we have a really good relationship, for example, with friends from a small restaurant. We try to present their food through this window, and also, you know, small bakery and something like this. Maybe we will be more focused for our quarter.
I have one additional question. Do you think your educational and social work will gain more importance in the this year and the next years after the pandemic?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You know, we discussed about it, and we thought that the place for meeting or some animation of meeting and something like this will be more important for the society, which now stay in social distance or online form, and we want to open the space for personal face-to-face meetings and something like this.
Mm. Alicia, how about you? How do you what do you feel think will be the good things that should survive the pandemic or that came from the pandemic?
Um, Firstly, I think what is important for me, and I think Josh has mentioned it before, um, what it means actually for us that pandemic will end. I think the consequences of the pandemic, it's as well, it's the pandemic as well. Maybe we won't need masks, and maybe you know, the situation, the sanitary regime would not be operating, but the public health care system will get back into normal. But the consequences will be there, invisible, and people will also have to deal with the grief that they're experiencing, with the loss that has happened. So for me, in terms of timescale, it's hard to imagine what it will be like and what it means this after the pandemic. But what I think about the now, because this is what I've learned during the pandemic, there is no future, there is the now, and then what I do now, what kind of decisions I make now, this is how I make the future. And this living under the state of urgency, and it gives me some agency as well. What can I do to make this the future I want to be part of, and what kind of communities I want to be part of, to not to feel alone, not to feel this huge social distance. So so these are the questions about values and where I want to put my energy and resources, whom I'm supporting actually. And I think, you know, that there is a one word that is very important word in Polish culture, and it is solidarity. And I have an impression that this word has become a central word to think about our future. I am very happy about that, and I think we need to work with this value, to work together, to feminize our institutions, our working environments, to support each other and share resources, because some of us are more privileged than the others. Just before the pandemic, we were not talking about it because it wasn't sexy, but let's do it now because we need it. So there is much of care work to be done. And again, as a feminist, I have to say it's unpaid work. It's very often non-visible work. It's work done by the minorities or female artists and workers. So yeah, let's listen carefully and be there for each other. I think I don't know if it's I don't care if it's optimistic or not. I think yeah, we're doing our job great. You know what you just described, what you're doing and your initiative. This is the work that is done and will be done. And I hope that policymakers will notice and support us with whether it's financial support, visibility, or yeah, any other social supports that will make the future sustainable for our bodies and souls.
Exactly. Josh, would you like to add something?
Oof, it's a tough note to end on. I mean, I really like everything that's been said already. I talked before about how I see there are these kind of new grassroots organizational forms emerging, new interdisciplinary art forms emerging that integrate digital music, dance, imagery, into theater and the possibilities of the theater art form growing. But I'm thinking about what Roman and Alicia just said, and there's something bigger, which is I think there's this, the pandemic has served to remind us of something really basic about what it means to be alive in communities and to live with one another, and to make visible some of the invisible things, such as the unpaid care work that happens everywhere. And now suddenly we are all doing very differently because we have to, and how much we need one another, in all sorts of ways, in the ways that Alicia was talking about, in the community links that Roman was talking about. I think that's got to be good for theater. I think that if as a field we can position ourselves as a real community institution, as an art form that works with and through and for the community, what Roman was saying about making the theater into a place for dialogue. I think we really can do that. I think people are going to be like, and I can promise you, certainly here in the UK, we have a kind of calendar of when we hope restrictions are going to be lifted this spring and summer, and people are raring to go. Yes, they want to go to the pubs, but I think they're also going to want to come to the theaters, and they're going to want to see one another. And if we can harness that, and we can stop being, we can keep seeing what we have seen, see all the unpaid work, and see the importance of very basic things like food and shelter and companionship and enough money to eat and pay the rent and that kind of thing. We can remember all that, and theaters can be a place where that we can do that together. I think we'll be really well placed for the next century, which is what I want to see.
So it's been 2 hours we've been talking together, and I would like to thank you very much for your time. It's been a great pleasure talking to you all, and I am happy that we could discuss this, and I'm very hopeful that the future will bring will keep those good things that happen among all the bad. And yeah, let's make the future better, I guess. That's the spirit I would like to leave the discussion on. So once again, thank you very much. This has been A Show Must Go On Offline, and I would like our audience members to ask to follow Arts and Theatre Institute on Facebook for the latest news in performing arts in Czech Republic and beyond. So once again, thank you very much. It's been a great pleasure talking to you.